In the sun-scorched sands of 1920s Egypt, the legendary detective Hercule Poirot seeks a tranquil holiday along the Nile. But when an archaeological expedition unearths a pharaoh's tomb steeped in whispers of a deadly curse, Poirot is drawn into a labyrinth of greed, betrayal, and murder. As bodies fall and ancient secrets unravel, only Poirot's unparalleled intellect can discern whether the killer is human or something far more sinister. With a cast of enigmatic suspects, a richly detailed Egyptian backdrop, and a final twist that will leave you stunned, this is a Poirot mystery crafted to captivate and challenge your deductive skills. Chapter 1. Arrival in the land of the Nile. The air of Cairo shimmered with heat, a golden haze that danced over the bustling streets where merchants hawked their wares, and the scent of jasmine mingled with the dust of ages. The Nile, eternal and serene, glided past, its waters reflecting the sun's relentless gaze. It was here, in the autumn of 1925, that Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with the impeccable moustache, stepped off the steamer Isis onto the quay, his polished shoes gleaming against the warm stones. He adjusted his straw hat, squinted at the blinding Egyptian sun, and murmured to himself, "Mon Dieu, this heat is an affront to civilized attire." Poirot had come to Egypt for repose, a rare indulgence after a particularly taxing case in London involving a stolen sapphire and a duplicitous dowager. The Nile, with its promise of leisurely cruises and ancient wonders, had beckoned as a balm for his overworked little grey cells. Yet, as he stood on the quay, his sharp eyes scanning the vibrant chaos, donkey carts clattering, fellahin in flowing galabeers, and Europeans in linen suits scurrying to their hotels, he felt the faintest prickle of anticipation. Repose, he knew, had a curious way of eluding him. "Poirot, mon vieux, is that truly you?" A voice, robust and unmistakably English, cut through the din. Poirot turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crumpled linen suit striding toward him, his face bronzed by the sun and creased with a grin. It was Sir Reginald Haverford, an archaeologist Poirot had met years ago in Paris during a rather delicate matter involving a forged Etruscan vase. "Sir Reginald," Poirot said, bowing slightly, his moustache twitching with a smile. "The years they have been kind, none. Though your suit, it begs for the iron." Haverford laughed, clapping Poirot on the shoulder with a force that made the detective wince. Still the dandy. Come, you must join me for a drink at Shepherd's Hotel. I'm in Cairo for the season, leading a dig in the Valley of the Kings. A tomb, Poirot, untouched for millennia. They say it's cursed, but I say it's gold." His eyes gleamed with the fervor of a man possessed by discovery. "A curse, you say?" Poirot's tone was light, but his eyes narrowed. "Monsieur, you know my views on such nonsense. The only curses are those of human greed and folly." "Ha! You sit or see, old chap. Join me at the dig. If you sib a taste for adventure, we sit a merry band, scholars, sponsors, and a few eccentrics. But I warn you, the desert plays tricks on the mind." Poirot considered this, his fingers brushing the brim of his hat. Holiday. Yes, but the prospect of a mystery, even one cloaked in superstitious drivel, was not unappealing. "Perhaps, Sir Reginald, I shall visit, but first, the hotel. I require a bath and a room free of sand." Shepherd's Hotel was a bastion of colonial elegance, its verandas draped with bougainvillea, its salons alive with the clink of glasses and the murmur of cosmopolitan voices. Poirot, after a bath that restored his sartorial dignity, joined Haverford in the hotel's long bar, where ceiling fans stirred the languid air. Over a glass of chilled hibiscus tea, Poirot declined the offered gin with a shudder. Haverford regaled him with tales of the dig. "We've found the tomb of Pharaoh Sekhemre, a minor ruler of the 18th dynasty," Haverford explained, his voice low with excitement. "Sealed, untouched, and inscribed with warnings. Death shall come on swift wings to those who disturb the king's rest. The locals are terrified, but my team's eager. We've got funding from Lord Ashbourne, a wealthy industrialist, and a brilliant Egyptologist, Dr. Amira Nasser, leading the cataloguing. Oh, and a few others, colourful lot. You'll meet them." Poirot sipped his tea, his mind already cataloguing details. This Lord Ashbourne, he is generous. Generous. He's practically bankrolling the whole venture, wants his name on a museum wing. No doubt. But there's tension, Poirot. Amira thinks he's too cavalier with the artifacts. Then there's young Tom Willard, my assistant. Bright lad, but ambitious. And don't get me started on Madame Dubois, the French widow who's tagging along as a patron of the arts. She's got more secrets than a sphinx. Poirot's moustache quivered. A diverse group then. And this curse, has it manifested? Haverford leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Not yet, but odd things have happened. Tools go missing. Shadows move where they shouldn't stet. The workers swear they hear whispers in the dark. I don't stet believe in curses, but it stets unsettling. Unsettling, Poirot echoed, his eyes gleaming. Monsieur, you have piqued the curiosity of Hercule Poirot. I shall accompany you to this dig, if only to ensure your Semery-Ban set does not succumb to superstition, or worse. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Nile in hues of crimson and gold, Poirot felt the familiar stir of his intellect. Egypt, with its ancient mysteries and modern intrigues, was no mere backdrop for a holiday. It was a stage, and he sensed the curtain was about to rise on a drama most deadly. Dear listener, the sands of Egypt conceal secrets, and Hercule Poirot is only beginning to unravel them. What mysteries have you encountered in your own corner of the world? Share your location, be it the bustling streets of a city or the quiet of a desert, and let us know if you've ever stumbled upon a puzzle worthy of Poirot's little grey cells. Subscribe to our channel to follow this tale of murder and intrigue, and join Poirot as he faces the Pharaoh's curse. Chapter 2. The Whisper of the Curse. The desert stretched endlessly before the Valley of the Kings, a sea of golden sand broken only by the jagged silhouettes of cliffs and the ancient scars of tombs long plundered. Hercule Poirot, seated in the back of a rattling motor car, driven by Sir Reginald Haverford, adjusted his sunglasses and clung to his dignity as the vehicle jolted over the uneven track. The air was thick with dust, and Poirot, in his pristine linen suit, muttered a quiet lament for the sartorial perfection, now dusted with Egypt's relentless grit. "Mon Dieu," he said, brushing a speck from his lapel, "this desert, it conspires against order and cleanliness." Haverford chuckled, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "You still forget the dust when you see the tomb, Poirot. Sekhemre's 6 resting place is a marvel, sealed for over 3,000 years. We sat on the cusp of history." The motor car crested a rise, revealing the excavation site, a cluster of canvas tents flapping in the dry wind, surrounded by wooden crates and the bustle of Egyptian workers hauling baskets of earth. In the distance, a low cliff face bore a freshly uncovered entrance, its stone doorway carved with hieroglyphs that seemed to pulse with silent warning under the midday sun. Poirot's sharp eyes took in every detail, the workers' wary glances, the gleam of tools, the faint unease that hung over the camp like a mirage. As they stepped from the car, a figure approached, a woman in her 30s, her dark hair tied back beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her khaki attire practical yet elegant. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, assessed Poirot with a flicker of curiosity. Dr. Amira Nasser. Haverford introduced our lead Egyptologist. Amira, this is Hercule Poirot, the detective I told you about. He sits here to observe. Detective Dr. Nasser Sitz's voice was cool, her accent a blend of Oxford and Cairo. I hope you sit not expecting crime in a place of scholarship, Monsieur Poirot. The only mysteries here are carved in stone. Poirot bowed, his moustache twitching. Mademoiselle, the human heart is a mystery far more perilous than any tomb. But I am here merely to admire your work, and perhaps to escape the chaos of Cairo. Her lips curved in a skeptical smile. Admire cautiously. The desert is no place for idle curiosity. They walked toward the tomb's entrance, where a young man in a sweat-stained shirt was directing workers. Tom Willard, Haverford's assistant, was barely 25, with a lean frame and an eager, almost feverish energy. His blue eyes darted to Poirot, then away, as if sizing up an intruder. "Tom," Haverford called. "Meet Poirot, a friend. He sips joining us for a bit." "Pleasure," Tom said curtly, shaking Poirot Sitz's hand with a grip that lingered a fraction too long. "Hope you sit not superstitious, sir. The locals are spooked about the curse." "Curse?" Poirot Sitz's tone was light, but his eyes gleamed. "Tell me, Monsieur Willard, what is this curse of which everyone speaks?" Dr. Nasser answered before Tom could. The inscription on the tomb sep's seal. It warns that those who disturb Pharaoh Secumre Sep's rest will face death on swift wings. You're a standard for royal burials, meant to deter grave robbers, but the workers believe it's Sep's real, especially after last week. "Last week?" Poirot prompted, his head tilting like a bird sensing prey. "A minor collapse in the outer chamber," Haverford said quickly. "No one hurt, but it rattled the men. They say the Pharaoh Sit spirit stirred. Superstition, of course." "Of course," Poirot echoed, though his gaze lingered on Dr. Nasser's guarded expression. The group moved toward the tomb's entrance, where a heavy wooden frame supported the ancient stone. Hieroglyphs snaked across the lintel, their sharp lines softened by centuries of sand. Dr. Nasser traced a symbol with her finger, a winged scarab. Secumre was a warrior pharaoh, forgotten by history until now. His tomb promises treasures, but also secrets. He was said to have angered the gods, hence the curse. "Angered the gods, you say?" A new voice, rich and melodious, joined the conversation. Madame Celeste Dubois, the French widow Haverford had mentioned, emerged from a nearby tent. Her silk scarf fluttered dramatically, and her green eyes sparkled with mischief. How thrilling! A cursed king, and a tomb full of danger. "Monsieur Poirot, you must find this deliciously intriguing." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, I find human nature far more intriguing than curses. And you? What brings you to this desolate place?" "Adventure, cher monsieur," she purred, her smile enigmatic, "and perhaps a touch of immortality. None, to fund such a discovery, is to live forever in its glory." Before Poirot could probe further, A heavy-set man in an immaculate white suit approached, his face flushed beneath a pith helmet. Lord Ashbourne, the expedition's financier, carried himself with the confidence of wealth and the impatience of a man unused to delay. "Haverford," he barked. "Are we sightseeing or excavating? Time is money, man." "Patience, my lord." Haverford replied, his tone strained. "We stir about to enter the antechamber. Poirot, you still want to see this?" Inside the tomb, the air was cool and heavy, smelling of earth and time. Torches cast flickering shadows on walls, painted with scenes of Secumer's victories, chariots, falcons, and gods with unblinking eyes. A stone sarcophagus loomed at the far end, its lid still sealed. Poirot's eyes roamed the chamber, noting the precision of the carvings, the tools scattered about and the faint scuff marks on the floor, marks that suggested someone had been here recently, perhaps in secret. As the group admired a golden amulet, uncovered that morning, a low, eerie moan echoed through the chamber. The workers froze, their faces paling. Tom Willard cursed under his breath, and Madame Dubois clutched her scarf. Nassar's eyes narrowed, while Lord Ashbourne scoffed, "Wind, nothing more." But Poirot, standing still, his hands clasped behind his back, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert air. The moan, he suspected, was no mere trick of nature. It was a warning, not of gods or curses, but of something far more tangible and dangerous. His little grey cells hummed. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the first act of this Egyptian drama had begun. Chapter 3. Assembling the Expedition. The desert night descended swiftly, cloaking the Valley of the Kings in a velvet darkness pierced only by the flicker of stars and the warm glow of lanterns strung around the expedition camp. The air, now mercifully cool, carried the faint scent of roasted lamb and spices from the dining tent, where a long table had been set with surprising elegance for such a remote outpost. Hercule Poirot, seated at one end, adjusted his bow tie and surveyed the gathering with the precision of a watchmaker inspecting gears. A dinner, he knew, was not merely a meal, it was a theatre of human nature, where masks slipped and motives glinted like knives. Sir Reginald Haverford presided at the table's head, his jovial demeanour tempered by the day's exertions. To his right sat Dr. Amira Nassar, her posture composed, but her eyes restless, darting between her fellow diners as if deciphering an inscription. Lord Ashbourne, resplendent in a fresh linen suit, occupied the opposite end, his booming voice dominating the conversation as he recounted his latest hunting triumph in the Sudan. Madame Celeste Dubois, her silk dress shimmering under the lantern light, leaned toward him with an amused smile, her fingers toying with a pearl necklace. Tom Willard, the young assistant, sat stiffly, his fork pushing food around his plate, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the tent. Completing the party was a new figure, Professor Elias Klein, a German epigrapher with a gaunt face and wire-rimmed spectacles, whose quiet intensity seemed to absorb the chatter around him. Poirot, sipping a glass of minted lemonade, gin again, he had declined with a shudder, observed the interplay. "A most eclectic company, Sir Reginald," he remarked. "One might think this a gathering of diplomats, not diggers in the sand." Haverford laughed, raising his glass. "Archaeology demands all sorts: Poirot, wealth, brains, ambition, and a dash of madness. To Secumer's sixth tomb, and the treasures we sit'll unearth." The toast was echoed, though Poirot noted varying degrees of enthusiasm. Lord Ashbourne's cheer was hearty, Madame Dubois' languid, Dr. Nasser's perfunctory. Tom Willard barely lifted his glass, and Professor Klein's toast was a mere nod, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth as if it held hieroglyphs. "Tell me, Professor Klein," Poirot said, his voice smooth as the Nile, "what brings a scholar of ancient scripts to this cursed tomb? Is it the lure of knowledge, or something more personal?" Clou's head snapped up, his pale eyes meeting Poirot's with a flicker of unease. "Knowledge, Herr Poirot," he said, in a clipped tone. "The inscriptions in Second Ray's tomb are unique, early demotic, mixed with royal epithets. They may rewrite our understanding of the 18th dynasty. I seek only truth." "Truth," Madame Dubois purred, her French accent curling around the word. "How noble. Yet I wonder, Professor, if truth pays as well as gold. Lord Ashbourne, surely you agree, treasure is a finer prize than dusty words?" Ashbourne guffawed, his jowls quivering. "Quite right, madame. I step in here to see my name on a museum plaque, not to scribble in notebooks, though I stepp'll wager Amira disagrees. She sit rather catalogue every potsherd than sell a single scarab." Dr. Nasser, Stitt's lips tightened. "The artifacts belong to Egypt, my lord, not to private collectors or foreign museums. Second Sitt's legacy is not a commodity." "Oh, come now," Ashbourne retorted, waving a dismissive hand. "You scholars are all the same, hoarding history like missus. If I stump funding this dig, I expect to return, not lectures." The air grew taut, and Poirot's moustache twitched with interest. He turned to Tom Willard, who had remained silent, his knuckles white around his fork. "And you, Monsieur Willard, a young man in such a venture, what is your ambition? Fame, fortune, or perhaps something else?" Tom Sipt's eyes flicked to Haverford, then back to his plate. "I just want to do good work, sir. Prove myself. The tomb accepts a chance to make my mark." "Your mark? Oui," Poirot said softly. "And yet the desert is a harsh judge of ambition." "None." Tom flushed, saying nothing, and Haverford stepped in, his tone hearty. "Tom Sepp's indispensable." Poirot, sharp as a tack, though he Sepp's got a lot to learn about patience. "Now, let Sepp's talk of the tomb. Amira, tell us about the antechamber findings." Dr. Nasser hesitated, then spoke with measured precision. "We Sepp uncovered ceremonial items, alabaster jars, a bronze dagger, and a faience amulet inscribed with Second Ray 6 cartouche. But the inner chamber remains sealed. The workers are reluctant to proceed, thanks to the curse." "Curse?" Ashbourne snorted, draining his wine. "Superstitious rot. I stuff half a mind to crack the sarcophagus open myself." "That would be unwise," Klein interjected, his voice low but firm. "The inscriptions warn of divine retribution. Even if you dismiss the supernatural, the tomb may have physical traps, poison dust, collapsing supports." Madame Dubois shivered theatrically. "How deliciously macabre! Tell me, Professor, do you believe the gods are watching us?" Colleen Sitt's jaw tightened. "I believe in caution, madam. The ancients were not fools. They protected their dead with more than words." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. The conversation swirled around him, but he was cataloguing details. Ashbourne's arrogance, Nasser's protectiveness, Klein's unease, Dubois' calculated charm, Willard's tension. Each was a piece in a puzzle he could not yet see. And then there was the curse, a fiction surely, but one that cast a shadow over the camp. As dessert was served, dates stuffed with almonds, a sudden gust of wind rattled the tent, extinguishing a lantern. The group fell silent, and in the darkness, Poirot heard a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on wood. It stopped as abruptly as it began, and when the lantern was relit, he noted the glances exchanged, Nassau's frown, Willard's clenched jaw, Dubois' arched brow. Wind, Haverford said too quickly. The desert sept's full of tricks. Oui, Poirot agreed, but his eyes lingered on the group. The tapping, he suspected, was no trick of nature. It was deliberate, human, a signal, perhaps, or a warning. The little grey cells stirred, sensing the first threads of a web being woven. As the dinner ended and the party dispersed into the starlit night, Poirot lingered by the tent's entrance, gazing at the cliff where Secomre's tomb lay hidden. The desert was silent now, but it whispered of secrets, secrets that, he knew, would soon demand a price in blood. Chapter 4. The Tomb Sept's Awakening. The dawn broke over the Valley of the Kings with a ferocity that turned the sand to molten gold, the cliffs casting long shadows like silent sentinels guarding the secrets of the dead. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the excavation site, his straw hat tilted against the rising sun, his eyes fixed on the dark maw of Pharaoh Secomre's tomb. The air was already warm, heavy with the scent of dust and anticipation, and the camp buzzed with activity as workers prepared ropes and torches for the day's descent. Poirot, ever meticulous, had polished his shoes despite the futility, for he believed that order in appearance reflected order in thought. And today his little grey cells demanded clarity. Sir Reginald Haverford emerged from his tent, his face alight with the zeal of discovery. "Poirot," he called, striding over with a map in hand. "Today Septem's the day. We breach the inner antechamber. The seals are intact, man. We set the first in 3 millennia to see what lies beyond." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching. "A privilege, Sir Reginald, but one that comes with responsibility. None. The tomb, it does not yield its secrets without protest." Haverford waved a dismissive hand. "Protest? Bah! We set engineers to shore up the walls, and Amiracit deciphered the outer inscriptions. No traps, no curses, just history, waiting to be claimed." "Claimed," Poirot murmured, his gaze drifting to the workers, who moved with a hesitance that belied Haverford's confidence. Their whispers, in rapid Arabic, spoke of the shadow of Secomre and wings in the dark. Superstition, perhaps, but Poirot knew fear could be a symptom of truth. The expedition team gathered at the tomb's entrance, Dr. Amira Nassar, her notebook clutched like a shield, Tom Willard carrying a crate of tools, his jaw set with determination, Professor Elias Klein adjusting his spectacles as he studied a rubbing of the hieroglyphs, Madame Celeste Dubois, her parasol an absurd contrast to the rugged terrain, and Lord Ashbourne puffing a cigar despite Nassar's protests about smoke near the artifacts. Poirot noted their expressions, excitement, apprehension, calculation, and filed them away like cards in a deck. Dr. Nassar led the way, her torch casting a golden glow on the stone walls as they descended a narrow passage. The air grew cooler, thicker, carrying the musty weight of centuries. The walls were adorned with vivid murals, Secomre in his chariot, smiting enemies, Anubis weighing hearts against a feather, and a scarab wings spread, hovering over a sealed door. Above it, hieroglyphs gleamed, their edges sharp as if carved yesterday. "Vedeth on swift wings Sister Klein read aloud, his voice echoing in the confined space. The warning is repeated here, more emphatic. It speaks of a guardian, a protector of the King Sit's rest. Guardian? Madame Dubois Sept's voice was teasing, but her eyes were wide. Do you mean a ghost, Professor? Or perhaps a statue with a spear? Clownest's lips thinned. The ancients were practical, madam. The guardian could be a mechanism, poisoned needles, falling stones. We must proceed with care. Care be damned, Lord Ashbourne growled, pushing past. I didn't fund this to tiptoe around fairy tales. Open the door, Haverford. Haverford hesitated, glancing at Nasser, who nodded reluctantly. Workers pried at the sealed stone door, their chisels ringing in the silence. With a groan, the slab shifted, revealing a chamber beyond. A collective gasp escaped the group as torchlight illuminated treasures, golden statuettes of gods, alabaster canopic jars, a chariot inlaid with lapis lazuli. At the chamber's center stood a massive stone sarcophagus, its lid carved with Sekhemre's likeness, his eyes staring into eternity. Magnifique, Poirot whispered, though his attention was not on the gold, but on the group. Ashbourne's eyes gleamed with greed, Dubois' with a strange melancholy. Willard's hands trembled as he sketched the chamber, and Nasser's face was a mask of reverence tinged with unease. Clune, however, knelt by the sarcophagus, his fingers tracing an inscription with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Remarkable, Klein murmured. This text, it speaks of a Sit hidden heart, Sit a treasure beyond gold. Sechem risked its greatest secret, buried with him. Treasure? Ashbourne Sit's voice was sharp. What kind, man? Jewels? Statues? Klein shook his head. It sits unclear. The text is cryptic, perhaps a riddle. It mentions a light that burns the unworthy. More riddles, Ashbourne scoffed. I want something I can hold, not poetry. Dr. Nasser Stei's voice cut through. I see. This is a cultural heritage, my lord, not your personal vault. Every artifact must be catalogued and preserved. Preserved for whom? Ashbourne shot back. Your precious Cairo museum? I stun paying for this, Nasser. Done sit, forget it. The tension crackled, and Poirot, Stick's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. Miss Ami, let us not quarrel in the presence of the dead. The tomb, it speaks to those who listen. Tell me, Mademoiselle Nasser, have you noticed anything unusual? Nasser hesitated, then pointed to the floor near the sarcophagus. These marks, scratches, fresh ones, someone sit's been here before us, despite the sealed door. Impossible, Haverford exclaimed. The seals were intact. Yet the marks are there, Poirot said. Crouching to examine them, the scratches were shallow, irregular, as if made by a tool dragged in haste. Curieux. A visitor, perhaps, who wished to remain unseen. Tom Willard shifted uncomfortably, his sketchbook slipping from his hands. Could be workers, sir. They sit in and out, moving equipment. Perhaps, Poirot said, but his tone suggested otherwise. He rose, dusting his hands with a handkerchief. We must be vigilant. The tomb, it is not only a place of treasure but of secrets, secrets that some may wish to keep buried. As the team continued cataloguing artifacts, a sudden clatter echoed from the passage behind them. A worker stumbled in, his face ashen, babbling in Arabic. Nasser translated, her voice steady but strained. He says a shadow moved in the outer passage, a figure with wings. He swears it wasn't human. Ashbourne laughed, but it was hollow. Dubois clutched her parasol, and Willard's eyes darted to the shadows. Klein's face remained impassive, but his fingers tightened on his notebook. Haverford clapped the worker on the shoulder, dismissing the tale, but Poirot's gaze lingered on the passage. The air seemed heavier now, the silence oppressive. "Superstition," Haverford said firmly. "We press on. Tomorrow, we open the sarcophagus." As the group filed out, Poirot lingered, his eyes sweeping the chamber. The scratches, the shadow, the cryptic inscription, they were threads in a tapestry he could not yet discern. But one thing was certain: the tomb's awakening had stirred more than dust. It had awakened something dangerous, and Hercule Poirot sensed that the first act of this drama was drawing to a close. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Sand. The midday sun hung mercilessly over the Valley of the Kings, transforming the desert into a furnace where heat waves shimmered like illusions, distorting the line between reality and mirage. Hercule Poirot, seeking respite from the relentless glare, had retreated to the shade of a canvas awning near the camp's supply tent. His linen suit, though impeccably tailored, clung uncomfortably, and he dabbed at his brow with a monogrammed handkerchief, murmuring, "This Egypt, it tests the endurance of even the most orderly mind." Yet his little grey cells remained alert, piecing together the fragments from the tomb's awakening, the fresh scratches, the cryptic inscription, the worker's tale of a winged shadow. Something was amiss, and Poirot sensed it like a discordant note in a symphony. From his vantage point, he observed the camp's rhythm workers hauling baskets of rubble, their chants rhythmic and sombre. Dr. Amiranessa, poring over artifacts at a makeshift table, her brow furrowed in concentration. Tom Willard pacing near the tomb entrance, his hands fidgeting with a measuring tape as if to steady his nerves. Lord Ashbourne lounged in a deck chair, fanning himself with a newspaper, while Madame Celeste Dubois strolled leisurely, her parasol casting a dancing shadow on the sand. Professor Elias Klein was absent, likely inside the tomb transcribing inscriptions. Sir Reginald Haverford, ever the enthusiastic leader, moved between them, issuing orders with his characteristic bluster. Poirot's reverie was interrupted by a sudden shout from the tomb entrance. Tom Willard bolted toward the sound, followed closely by Haverford. Poirot rose swiftly. His curiosity piqued and hurried after them, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the hot sand. As he approached, a cluster of workers gathered, their faces etched with fear, pointing and muttering in hushed tones. "What is it?" Haverford demanded, pushing through. Willard knelt by the entrance, examining something on the ground. "Sand, sir," Willard said, his voice tight. "But look, it's piled here, as if it shifted on its own. And they're footprints, but they lead nowhere. They just stop." Poirot knelt beside him, his eyes scanning the disturbance. Indeed, a small mound of sand had appeared overnight, blocking part of the path into the tomb. Fresh footprints, large, booted, trailed from the camp, but vanished abruptly midway, as if the intruder had been swallowed by the desert. No wind could explain it. The air had been still all morning, and etched faintly in the sand beside the mound was a symbol, a crude scarab with outstretched wings. "The curse," one worker whispered, crossing himself despite his Muslim faith. "The guardian awakens." "Nonsense," Haverford barked, though his face paled. "Someone sits playing tricks. Sabotage, perhaps, from rival diggers." Dr. Nasser arrived, her eyes widening at the symbol. "That scarab. It matches the one on the sarcophagus. But how? No one could have drawn it without being seen." Madame Dubois, drawn by the commotion, tilted her head. "How intriguing. A message from the beyond, Or perhaps from someone very much alive. None. Lord Ashbourne lumbered over, his cigar clenched between his teeth. Bloody pranksters! I still have the guards doubled. If it sets those Cairo thieves sniffing around my investment. Your investment? NASA snapped, her composure cracking. This is a site of national importance, not your personal quarry. Ashbourne-Stitt's face reddened. Watch your tone, Doctor. Without my money, you Stitt be digging with your hands. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the rising tension like a knife. Mes amis, let us not leap to accusations. Observe the footprints are deep, suggesting a man of considerable weight, yet they vanish without trace. The sand mound. It is not natural. See the uniformity, as if poured from a bag, and the scarab drawn with a stick perhaps. But why? To frighten, to warn, or to distract? Willard stood, brushing sand from his knees. Distract from what, sir? Poirot-Stitt's mustache quivered. That, Monsieur Willard, is the question. What lies in the tomb that someone wishes us to fear? Professor Klein emerged from the tomb. At that moment his face streaked with dust, a notebook in hand. He glanced at the scene, his expression unreadable behind his spectacles. What has happened? Haverford explained curtly, and Cluny-Sitt's eyes lingered on the scarab. The symbol of rebirth, but inverted, it means death. A deliberate omen. Deliberate. Dubois echoed, her voice laced with mock surprise. You think one of us did this, Professor? Clune shrugged. I think nothing. But the ancients believed in signs. We should heed them. The group dispersed uneasily, the workers refusing to enter the tomb until a local imam performed a blessing. Poirot lingered, his gaze sweeping the sand. He noted a faint depression near the mound, perhaps where a bag had rested, and a single thread white linen caught on a rock. Linen like that of the expedition's uniforms or suits. As the sun climbed higher, Poirot returned to his awning, his mind whirring. The incident was no supernatural event. It was human cunning, designed to sow discord. But whose? Ashbourne, to assert control. NASA, to protect the site. Willard with his ambitious eyes. Or Klein, whose knowledge of the inscriptions seemed almost too intimate. That afternoon, as the camp simmered in uneasy quiet, Poirot overheard a whispered conversation behind the supply tent. Creeping closer, he recognized Willard-Sitt's voice, tense and low. It's Sitt's getting out of hand. We need to stop before. Before what? Nassau-Sitt's voice replied. Sharp. You started this, now see it through. Their voices faded as they moved away, leaving Poirot with more questions. Alliances, secrets. The shadows in the sand were lengthening, and he knew the first true darkness was yet to fall. By evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, casting elongated shadows that twisted like spectres, the camp's lanterns flickered to life, and Poirot sat alone, sipping tea, his little grey cells aligning the clues. The eerie incident had sparked fear. Yes, but it had also revealed fractures in the group, and in those fractures the truth would eventually gleam. Chapter 6. Death Under the Stars. The night sky over the Valley of the Kings was a canopy of infinite darkness, studded with stars that twinkled like distant jewels, indifferent to the dramas unfolding below. A chill wind whispered through the camp, carrying the faint howl of jackals from the distant hills, a sound that evoked the ancient guardians of the dead. Hercule Poirot, unable to sleep in the stifling confines of his tent, had stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. He paced slowly along the perimeter of the camp, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind replaying the day's eerie incidents, the vanishing footprints, the drawn scarab, the overheard whispers between Nasser and Willard. The curse, he murmured to himself, it is but a veil for human malice, but whose malice, and to what end? The camp was quiet. The lanterns dimmed to embers, casting long shadows that danced like spectres on the tent walls. Most of the team had retired early, exhausted by the heat and tension, but Poirot's sharp ears caught the murmur of voices from the dining tent. Curiosity drew him closer, and through a slit in the canvas he glimpsed Lord Ashbourne and Madame Dubois seated at the table, their heads bent in conversation over a bottle of brandy. Too risky, Celesta," Ashbourne was saying, his voice a low rumble. "If Haverford finds out about the smuggling, it'll ruin everything." Dubois' Stetster laughter was soft, tinkling like glass. "Mon cher, risks are what make life exciting. Besides, the artifacts will fetch a fortune in Paris. You worry too much." Ashbourne grunted, pouring another glass. "And that detective Poirot, he sits sniffing around, sharp as a hawk, that one." "Poirot?" Dubois' tone turned thoughtful. "He is clever, oui, but distracted by the curse nonsense. Let the shadows do their work." Their voices faded as Poirot withdrew, his moustache quivering with interest. Smuggling? Ah, a motive emerges. But was it the only one? He continued his walk, passing Professor Klein's tent, where a lantern still burned, illuminating the silhouette of the epigrapher hunched over his notes. Further on, Tom Willard's tent was dark, but Poirot noted a faint rustle, as if someone stirred within. It was near the tomb entrance that the night's tranquility shattered. A piercing scream echoed through the valley, raw and terror-filled, cutting off abruptly into a gurgle. Poirot froze, his heart pounding, then hurried toward the sound, his small frame moving with surprising agility over the uneven sand. Others emerged from their tents, Haverford dishevelled in his pyjamas, Nassar wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, Willard wide-eyed and breathless. "Over there," Willard shouted, pointing to a figure slumped near the tomb's mouth. They converged on the spot, lanterns raised high. Lord Ashbourne lay face down in the sand, his white suit stained dark with blood, a ceremonial bronze dagger from the tomb protruding from his back. His eyes stared blankly at the stars, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. Beside him, etched hastily in the sand, was another scarab symbol, its wings spread wide. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, kneeling to examine the body. The dagger was ancient, its hilt encrusted with lapis, matching one catalogued earlier that day. No footprints marred the sand around the corpse, save for Ashbourne's own stumbling tracks leading from the camp. Haverford's face was ashen. Murder. But how? No one could have approached without being seen. "The curse," a worker muttered, crossing himself. "Death on swift wings. It has struck." Nissa Sit's hands trembled as she shone her lantern on the symbol. "This is no curse. It's Sit's madness. Who would do this?" Madame Dubois arrived last, her face pale beneath her makeup. "Horrible. Poor Lord Ashbourne. We were just talking. And now, just talking." Poirot Sit's voice was mild, but his eyes pierced her. "Madame, when did you part company?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "An hour ago, perhaps. He said he needed air to think about the dig." Professor Klein joined them, his spectacles askew. "This dagger, it was in the antechamber. Secure, I thought." "Secure," Willard echoed, his voice shaky. Someone must have taken it. But why Ashbourne? Poirot rose, dusting his knees. Why indeed? Mes amis, this is no supernatural vengeance. Observe, the wound is precise, from behind, suggesting trust or surprise. No struggle, no noise until the end. And the symbol drawn after death, to invoke the curse. Haverford swallowed hard. You mean one of us? We, Poirot said gravely. The killer walks among us, hiding behind the veil of legend. We must alert the authorities in Luxor, but until they arrive, Hercule Poirot will investigate. The group exchanged uneasy glances, the starlight revealing fear and suspicion in their eyes. Nessa's gaze lingered on Willard, who avoided it. Dubois toyed with her necklace. Klein adjusted his glasses, his face impassive. As the body was covered with a tarp, and the workers dispersed in hushed terror, Poirot lingered by the tomb. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal witnesses, but they offered no clues, yet his little grey cells hummed. The smuggling hint, the alliances, the missing footprints. Death had come under the stars, not on wings of a curse, but on the feet of a cunning murderer. And Poirot vowed to unmask them before the shadows claimed another. Chapter 7. Poirot's little grey cells. Stir. The morning sun rose over the Valley of the Kings like a relentless inquisitor, casting harsh light on the scene of last night's horror. The camp, usually abuzz with the sounds of excavation, was shrouded in an unnatural silence, broken only by the distant calls of vultures circling overhead. Hercule Poirot stood near the covered body of Lord Ashbourne, his egg-shaped head tilted in contemplation, his moustache impeccably waxed despite the chaos. He had risen early, forgoing his customary tisane to examine the crime scene afresh, his little grey cells already whirring like a well-oiled machine. Murder, he mused aloud to himself. It is always a distortion of order, and here, in this desert of antiquity, the distortion is profound. Maldash. Sir Reginald Haverford approached, his face haggard from a sleepless night, carrying a steaming mug of coffee. Poirot, old chap, any thoughts? The authorities from Luxor won't arrive until afternoon. The Nile ferry surge delayed. We sewed on our own till then. Poirot nodded, his green eyes sharp. Thoughts, Sir Reginald? Many. But first, facts. The dagger. Ancient, yes, but handled recently. No fingerprints perhaps in this sand, but the angle of the wound suggests a killer of average height, striking from behind with force, and the scarab symbol, drawn post-mortem, to perpetuate the myth of the curse. Haverford rubbed his chin, to scare us off. But why? Ashbourne. He was the money behind this dig. Without him, we might have to pack up. Precisement, Poirot said, his finger pointing to the undisturbed sand. The absence of footprints is intriguing. The killer must have approached carefully, perhaps sweeping their tracks. Or there is another way into this area, unseen. As they spoke, Dr. Amira Nessa joined them, her eyes red-rimmed, but her voice steady. Monsieur Poirot, the workers are refusing to continue. They believe the Pharaoh-Sit's guardian has claimed its first victim. I tried reasoning, but fear is stronger than logic. Poirot regarded her thoughtfully. Fear, mademoiselle, is a tool as sharp as any dagger. Tell me, where were you last night? After dinner. Nessa stiffened. In my tent, cataloguing artifacts. Alone. Alone. Poirot echoed. And you heard nothing? No scream? She shook her head. The wind was strong. It masked sounds. Before Poirot could press further, Tom Willard hurried over, his youthful face pale and drawn. Sir Reginald, the tomb, someone sits being inside again. Tools are missing and there sits fresh sand near the sarcophagus. Haverford cursed under his breath. Damn it all. Poirot, come with me. Inside the tomb, the air was cooler, oppressive with the weight of stone and secrets. Poirot's torch beam swept the antechamber, revealing displaced sand and an empty spot where a small chisel had been. "Caillou," he said. "The intruder seeks something specific. The hidden heart Klein mentioned, perhaps." Professor Elias Klein, who had followed them in, adjusted his spectacles. Possible. The inscriptions hint at a concealed compartment in the sarcophagus, a relic of great power, but we haven't yet opened it yet. Poirot turned to him. "And you, Professor, where were you when Lord Ashbourne met his end?" Kleinsitz's gaze was steady. "In my tent, transcribing notes. I heard the scream and came running." "Running," Poirot repeated. "Yet you arrived last." "None." Clune shrugged. "I was absorbed in my work. Time slips away in such pursuits." Madame Celeste Dubois appeared at the entrance, her silk robe fluttering like a ghost. "Gentlemen, this gloom is unbearable. Have you found the monster yet, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Monster? Ah, madame, the only monsters are those within us. You and Lord Ashbourne, your conversation last night, it was about smuggling artifacts. We?" Dubois. Edhurst's smile faltered for a fraction. "Smuggling. How dramatic. We discussed investments, nothing more." He was concerned about the Digsept's costs. "Investments," Poirot said softly, "and yet he is dead. Coincidence?" She laughed, but it rang hollow. "Life is full of coincidences, monsieur. Or do you suspect me?" "I suspect everyone, madam," Poirot replied, "until the little grey cells reveal the truth." Leaving the tomb, Poirot gathered the group in the dining tent, where a makeshift breakfast lay untouched. He paced before them, his hands gesturing elegantly. "Mes amis, let us reconstruct. Lord Ashbourne leaves Madame Dubois around midnight, walks toward the tomb, perhaps to check on something, or meet someone. He is stabbed from behind, falls, and the killer draws the scarab. No witnesses, no tracks. But why the symbol? To blame the curse, to halt the dig." Willard fidgeted. "To protect the tomb. Some believe it should remain sealed." Nasser nodded.
Yes.
"But murder, that sixth extreme." Klein interjected. "Or to cover a theft, if the hidden relic is valuable." Haverford sighed. "Poirot, what do you suggest?" "Observation," Poirot said, "and questions. Monsieur Willard, you and Mademoiselle Nassar, your whispered conversation yesterday about stopping before it's too late. Suspense, what was it? What was it?" Willard flushed, glancing at Nassar. We were discussing the curse rumors, trying to calm the workers." "Calm them by whispering." Poirot pressed. "None. There is more." Nassar sighed. "Fine. Tom and I, we been investigating odd occurrences. Missing tools, strange noises. We thought someone was sabotaging the dig, perhaps Ashbourne himself, to claim insurance or something." Poirot sits, eyebrow arched. "Sabotage. Interesting. And now he is dead." The group fell silent, suspicion thickening the air like dust. Poirot excused himself, stepping into the sunlight, his mind aligning clues, smuggling, sabotage, the hidden relic. The little grey cells stirred vigorously now, sensing patterns emerging from the chaos. But one piece was missing, a motive that tied it all. As vultures wheeled above, Poirot knew the killer would strike again, and he must be ready. Chapter 8. Secrets of the Sarcophagus. The oppressive heat of midday had given way to the cooler shadows of afternoon in the Valley of the Kings, where the cliffs loomed like ancient judges over the expedition camp. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the murder that had cast a pall over the group, insisted on continuing the exploration of Pharaoh Sekhemre's tomb. The dead, he declared to Sir Reginald Haverford as they gathered tools and lanterns, they do not rest until their secrets are laid bare, and neither shall we. His little grey cells, stirred by the previous night's revelations, demanded action, action that might provoke the killer into a mistake. The team, diminished by Lord Ashbourne's absence and the workers' growing reluctance, assembled at the tomb's entrance with a mix of trepidation and resolve. Dr. Amira Nasser carried her notebook, her face a mask of professional detachment masking deeper unease. Tom Willard hefted a crowbar, his youthful energy tempered by shadows under his eyes. Professor Eloius Klein adjusted his spectacles, his gaunt features sharpened by the torchlight. Madame Celeste Dubois, ever the enigmatic presence, had insisted on joining, her silk scarf a splash of colour in the dusty gloom. Haverford led the way, his bluster a thin veil over his anxiety. Today, Haverford announced as they descended the passage, "We open the sarcophagus. Ashbourne would have wanted it progress, despite everything." Nasserist's voice echoed sharply off the walls. "Progress, with a murderer loose. We should wait for the authorities." Poirot, walking beside her, smiled faintly. "Waiting, mademoiselle, allows the guilty to weave tighter webs. No, we proceed. The tomb may hold clues to the motive." The antechamber greeted them with its familiar splendor, golden artifacts, glinting in the lantern light, murals of Sekhemre's triumphs staring down with eternal vigilance. The massive stone sarcophagus dominated the room, its lid sealed with ancient resins, the carved face of the pharaoh serene, yet forbidding. Klein knelt immediately, tracing the inscriptions with reverent fingers. Here, the reference to the hidden heart. It's not metaphorical. Look, this seam, disguised as decoration. A secret compartment. Willard Stitt's eyes widened. A hidden relic. What could it be? Power, Klein replied cryptically. Sekhemre was said to possess an amulet that granted victory in battle. The Heart of Re, a ruby said to burn with the sunset's fire. Dubois' Sit's laughter tinkled like breaking glass. A magical gem. How romantic. And valuable? None. No wonder poor Ashbourne was so eager. Haverford nodded to Willard. Let's crack it open, lad." With crowbars and careful leverage, they pried the lid free, the stone grinding in protest, as if the pharaoh himself resisted. Dust billowed, and the group coughed, waving it away. Inside lay the inner coffin, gilded and intact, but Klein's attention fixed on the base of the outer sarcophagus. There, the compartment. A small panel, cleverly concealed, slid open under his expert touch. Within gleamed a velvet pouch, ancient yet preserved. Klein withdrew it gingerly, opening it to reveal a magnificent ruby amulet, its facets catching the light like captured flames. Gasps filled the chamber. "The Heart of Re," Nasser breathed. her scholarly facade cracking with awe, its sects real, priceless, historically, culturally. Financially too, Dubois murmured, her eyes gleaming. Imagine what collectors would pay. Poirot's sharp gaze noted the reactions, Haverford's excitement, Willard's covetous glance, Klein's possessive grip, Nassar's protective stance, Dubois' calculated smile. Magnifique, he said. But this heart, it beats with danger. Lord Ashbourne knew of it, perhaps. A motive for murder, greed. Clune clutched the amulet tighter. I discovered the inscription. If anyone claims it, it should be for scholarship, not sale. Nasser rounded on him. Scholarship. You sit-been secretive professor, hiding in the tomb at odd hours. What else have you found? Clunist's face flushed. Accusations. I dedicated my life to this era, unlike some who see only national pride or profit. National pride, Nasser shot back. This belongs to Egypt, not your German museums or Ashbourne Sip's pockets. Willard stepped between them. Enough. We sat all on edge. But Poirot sits right. This could be why Ashbourne died. He was pushing to sell artifacts on the black market. Dubois arched a brow. And how do you know that, young man? Eavesdropping. Willard hesitated. Ice overheard him arguing with Haverford about it. Haverford's star's jaw dropped. Me? Nonsense. Ashbourne mentioned investments, but I assumed legitimate. Poirot interjected smoothly. Assumptions, Sir Reginald, are the enemies of truth. Madame Dubois, you and Ashbourne discussed the investment sitch last night. Care to elaborate? She shrugged elegantly. Private matters, monsieur. He sought my advice on French buyers. Nothing sinister. Nothing sinister, Poirot echoed. Yet he is dead. And this amulet surfaces. Coincidence or orchestration? As tension simmered, a faint scraping sound echoed from the passage stone on stone. The group froze. Willard grabbed a lantern, peering out. Who sits there? Silence answered, but Poirot's eyes narrowed at fresh scuff marks on the floor. Someone listens, or searches. Klin pocketed the amulet swiftly. We must secure this. Its stakes too valuable to leave here. Nasser protested. It stays in the tomb until catalogued. Their argument escalated, voices bouncing off the walls, revealing deeper rivalries, Klein's academic jealousy of Nasser's rising star, Willard's resentment of Ashbourne's favoritism toward Haverford, Dubois' hinted past affair with the Lord, Haverford's financial desperation masked by enthusiasm. Poirot observed it all, his mind cataloguing. The sarcophagus had yielded secrets, yes, but human ones, more perilous than any relic. As they emerged into the fading light, the amulet heavy in Klein's pocket, Poirot knew the killer's next move loomed. The heart of Ra burned bright, but it cast long shadows of betrayal. Chapter 9. A second strike. The twilight air in the Valley of the Kings carried a restless edge, as if the desert itself held its breath, wary of the secret stirring within its sands. The camp, still reeling from Lord Ashbourne's murder, had settled into an uneasy rhythm, with workers casting nervous glances at the tomb and whispering of Secumary's wrath. Hercule Poirot, seated at a folding table outside his tent, sipped a cup of chamomile tea, procured with some difficulty from the camp's meagre stores, and reviewed his notes, his precise handwriting cataloguing every clue: the vanishing footprints, the stolen dagger, the heart of Ra amulet, the overheard whispers of smuggling and sabotage. The puzzle, he murmured. "It grows complex, but the pattern emerges. Always there is a pattern." His reverie was shattered by a commotion from the excavation site. A worker's shout, sharp and panicked, pierced the evening calm, followed by the clatter of dropped tools and running feet. Poirot rose swiftly, his small frame moving with purpose toward the tomb's entrance, where a crowd had gathered under the flickering glow of lanterns. Sir Reginald Haverford was already there, his face pale as he barked orders to clear the area. Dr. Amira Nasser stood frozen, her notebook slipping from her hands, while Tom Willard pushed through the workers, his expression a mix of dread and urgency. "What has happened?" Poirot demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Haverford turned, his eyes wide. "It's that's Klein. Professor Klein. He's that's dead." Poirot's moustache twitched as he followed Haverford into the tomb's antechamber, where the air was thick with dust and the scent of ancient stone. There, slumped against the sarcophagus, lay Ellis Klein, his wire-rimmed spectacles askew, his throat marred by a thin crimson line. A garrote, a crude wire looped tightly, lay discarded beside him, its end stained with blood. On the stone beside his body, another scarab symbol had been scratched, its wings jagged and uneven, as if drawn in haste. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, kneeling to examine the scene. The professor's notebook lay open nearby, its pages filled with meticulous transcriptions, but one sheet was torn, a jagged edge suggesting something had been removed. The heart of Ras amulet, which Klein had pocketed earlier, was gone. Madame Celeste Dubois arrived, her silk scarf clutched to her chest, her face pale but composed. "Another murder. Mon Dieu. This place is cursed indeed." "Cursed?" Poirot's tone was sharp. "Non, madame. This is the work of human hands, not divine ones. Observe the garrote, a weapon of stealth, requiring proximity and strength. The scarab, another attempt to invoke the myth. But why, Klein? And where is the amulet?" Tom Willard, visibly shaken, stammered. "He was in here alone, working late. I saw him enter after dinner, said he wanted to double-check the inscriptions." Nasser's voice trembled with anger. "He was obsessed with that amulet. I told him to leave it in the safe, but he insisted on keeping it close." Haverford ran a hand through his hair. 2 deaths in 2 days. Horror! This is madness. And the workers are ready to bolt, and the authorities still haven't yet arrived. Poirot rose, dusting his knees with a handkerchief. "Madness, oui, but calculated. The killer strikes with precision, choosing victims who threaten their goal. Lord Ashbourne, perhaps for his greed. Professor Klein, for his knowledge. The amulet is the key, or a distraction." Dubois tilted her head, her green eyes narrowing. "You think someone killed for that ruby? But who? We were all at dinner, except Klein. Were we?" Poirot's gaze swept the group. "Monsieur Willard, you left the table early, claiming a headache. Mademoiselle Nassar, you were absent for a time, fetching papers. Madame Dubois, you lingered in the shadows, adjusting your scarf. And Sir Reginald, you stepped out to speak with a worker. Olibis, they are fragile things." Willard flushed. "Are you accusing us? I was in my tent sick." Nasser Stick's eyes flashed, "And I was organizing artifacts. You can suspect me. I've dedicated my life to protecting this tomb." Haverford protested. "Poirot, surely you don't think." "I think everything," Poirot interrupted, "until the truth is clear. Now, let us secure this scene. The amulet 6 theft suggests our killer is not finished. As workers covered Klein's body and sealed the tomb under Haverford's orders, Poirot stepped outside, his eyes scanning the camp. The lanterns cast eerie shadows, and he noted a faint glint near the supply tent, perhaps a dropped tool or something more sinister. He retrieved it, a small silver cigarette case engraved with the initials C.D. Celeste Dubois. Odd, for she claimed never to smoke. Returning to the group, Poirot held up the case. "Madame, is this yours?" Dubois' smile was serene. "Why, yes, monsieur. I must have dropped it earlier. Careless of me." "Careless," Poirot echoed, pocketing the case. "Or convenient. Tell me, madame, what brought you near the tomb last night after your investment talk with Ashbourne?" Her laughter was light, but her eyes flickered. "A stroll, nothing more. The desert air is so invigorating." Poirot nodded, unconvinced. The group dispersed, their faces etched with fear and suspicion. Alone under the stars, Poirot reviewed the facts. 2 murders, both tied to the tomb. A stolen amulet, a cigarette case out of place, whispered conspiracies of smuggling and sabotage. The little grey cells buzzed, sensing the killer's next move was imminent. The desert night was silent, but it whispered of betrayal, and Poirot knew he must act swiftly to prevent another strike. Chapter 10. Interrogations by Moonlight. The moon hung low over the Valley of the Kings, its pale light casting an ethereal glow across the desert, transforming the camp into a stage of shadows and secrets. Hercule Poirot stood outside the dining tent, his silhouette sharp against the silvered sand, his hands clasped behind his back as he contemplated the mounting toll of death. Lord Ashbourne, Professor Klein, both silenced by a cunning hand, cloaked in the myth of a pharaoh's curse. The air was cool now, carrying the faint musk of the Nile, but the atmosphere in the camp crackled with tension, each member of the expedition eyeing the others with suspicion. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, weaving connections between the stolen Heart of Ra amulet, the scarab symbols, and the cigarette case bearing Madame Dubois' initials. "The truth," he murmured. "It hides in plain sight, but it requires the proper angle of vision." Determined to provoke revelations, Poirot had requested the remaining team, Sir Reginald Haverford, Dr. Amira Nasser, Tom Willard, and Madame Celeste Dubois, to gather in the dining tent after supper for what he called a conversation under the stars. The authorities from Luxor were still delayed, and Poirot knew he must press forward alone, using the moonlight to illuminate lies. The tent's lanterns flickered, casting wavering shadows on the canvas walls, and the group sat uneasily around the table, their faces taut with anticipation or dread. Poirot began, his voice smooth yet commanding. "Mes amis, 2 murders have stained this expedition, and the killer sits among us, hiding behind the veil of the curse. I, Hercule Poirot, will not be deceived by such theatrics. Let us speak plainly. Each of you, tell me, where were you when Professor Klein met his end?" Sir Reginald Haverford cleared his throat, his usual bluster subdued. "I was in my tent, writing letters to our sponsors. The funding sits in jeopardy now. With Ashbourne gone, I heard the scream and ran to the tomb." Poirot Step's eyes narrowed. "Letters, you say? Yet your lamp was dim when I passed your tent, Sir Reginald. Were you truly writing, or perhaps elsewhere?" Haverford flushed. "I may have stepped out briefly to check the guards' secret posts. The workers are jumpy." Poirot turned to Dr. Nasser, whose hands were clasped tightly in her lap. "And you, mademoiselle?" You were absent from dinner for a time. Nessa met his gaze, her dark eyes defiant. I was in the artifact tent, securing the finds from yesterday. Clean sits death. It sets a tragedy, but I was nowhere near the tomb. Securing artifacts, Poirot echoed. Yet you argued with Klein about the heart of Ran. Did you resent his obsession with it? She bristled. Resent? I respected his scholarship, but he was secretive. Hoarding knowledge. I protect Egypt's heritage, monsieur, not destroy it. Tom Willard shifted uncomfortably, his youthful face pale under the lantern light. I was in my tent, like I said before. Headache. Didn't hear anything until the shout. Poirot's mustache twitched. A headache again? Curious, Monsieur Willard. How often you are indisposed when death strikes, and your conversation with Mademoiselle Nasser, too, stopping before it sits too late sits. What did it concern truly? Willard's eyes darted to Nasser, then away. I told you. Worker morale. We were worried the curse rumors would halt the dig. Madame Dubois leaned forward, her smile enigmatic. Such passion, young man. And you, Monsieur Poirot, what do you think? Am I next, perhaps? Poirot held her gaze, producing the silver cigarette case. Madame, this was found near the tomb, after Kleinsitz's death. Yours, none. Yet you claim not to smoke. Her laughter was light, but her fingers tightened on her scarf. A memento, monsieur. From a past admirer, I carry it for sentiment, not use. I was in my tent, reading, when Klein was killed. Reading, Poirot said softly. Yet your lamp cast shadows of movement, madame. Were you, perhaps, strolling again? Her smile didn't waver. You see much, monsieur. Yes, I stepped out to admire the moon. Is that a crime? Poirot paced slowly, his hands gesturing like a conductor. No, but murder is. Let us consider Lord Ashbourne, killed with a dagger, perhaps for his smuggling plans. Professor Klein, garroted, the heart of Ray stolen. Both deaths staged with scarabs to mimic the curse. The killer knows the tomb, the artifacts, the team's secrets, and the amulet. Where is it now? Haverford frowned. You think someone here has it? Oui, Poirot said. Or it is hidden to be retrieved later. Tell me, Sir Reginald, did Ashbourne confide in you about his financial troubles? Haverford hesitated. He hinted at debts, said the dig was his chance to recover. I thought he meant fame, not smuggling. Poirot turned to Nasser. And you, mademoiselle, you suspected sabotage. Did you confront Klein about his late-night work in the tomb? Nasser Sturt's jaw tightened. Yes, once. He was secretive, always scribbling, never sharing. I thought he was documenting, but maybe he was planning to steal the amulet. Willard interjected, his voice sharp. Clune wasn't a thief. He was obsessed, sure, but he lived for history, not money. Dubois' eyes sparkled. Unlike Ashbourne, none. Or perhaps you, Monsieur Willard, with your ambitions. Willard's face reddened, but before he could retort, a low, eerie moan echoed from the direction of the tomb, chilling the air. The group froze, and even Poirot's composure wavered for a moment. The wind, Haverford said, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot stood abruptly. Enough. I will inspect the tomb again at dawn. Until then, no one enters. The killer seeks to frighten us, but Hercule Poirot does not fear shadows. As the group dispersed, their alibis fragile, and their glances laden with distrust, Poirot lingered under the moonlight. The moan, the cigarette case, the missing amulet, the threads were tightening, but the pattern was incomplete. The killer was close, watching, and Poirot sensed their next move would be bold. He returned to his tent, his mind racing, determined to unravel the web before another life was claimed. Chapter 11. The Hidden Chamber. The dawn in the Valley of the Kings broke with a deceptive calm, the first rays of sunlight gilding the cliffs and casting long shadows across the silent camp. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, stood at the entrance to Pharaoh Sekemre's tomb, his eyes scanning the stone doorway as if it might whisper its secrets. The murders of Lord Ashbourne and Professor Elias Klein weighed heavily on the expedition, and the workers' fear of the curse had reduced their numbers to a mere handful. Yet Poirot's little grey cells were undeterred, driven by the certainty that the heart of Ra amulet, stolen from Klein's body, held the key to the killer's motive. The eerie moan from last night lingered in his mind, not as a supernatural omen, but as a calculated act. "The killer plays a dangerous game," he murmured, "but Hercule Poirot is no pawn." Sir Reginald Haverford joined him, his face etched with exhaustion, his usual enthusiasm dampened by the mounting death toll. "Poirot, the workers are barely cooperating. If we don't find answers soon, the dig set's finished." "What sits your plan?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "To listen, Sir Reginald. To the tomb speaks. If one knows how to hear. Let us explore deeper. There is more to Sekemre's resting place than we have seen." Dr. Amira Nasser, Tom Willard, and Madame Celeste Dubois gathered reluctantly, their faces reflecting a mix of fear and defiance. Nasser carried a torch, her posture rigid with determination to protect the tomb's legacy. Willard's hands fidgeted with a coil of rope, his eyes darting nervously to the shadows. Dubois, her silk scarf fluttering in the morning breeze, smiled faintly, as if the murders were merely an intriguing diversion. "Another adventure, Monsieur Poirot," she purred. "You do keep us entertained." "Adventure, madame," Poirot replied, his tone dry. "None. This is a pursuit of truth, and truth it does not entertain. It reveals." They descended into the tomb, the air growing heavier with each step, the walls closing in with the weight of millennia. The antechamber, now familiar, felt oppressive, its golden artifacts and murals muted by the pall of death. Poirot's torch swept the floor, pausing on the scuff marks noted earlier, marks that suggested unauthorized visits. His eyes lingered on a section of the wall near the sarcophagus, where the stone seemed slightly misaligned, a hairline crack betraying a hidden seam. "Mademoiselle Nasser," Poirot said, pointing, "this wall, does it not seem irregular?" Nasser frowned, running her fingers along the crack. "It sits subtle. But yes, the masonry here is different, newer perhaps, added later. A false wall." Haverford's eyes widened. "A hidden chamber. My God, we missed it." Willard stepped forward, crowbar in hand. "Let's open it. Could be where the amulet sits hidden." Dubois' laughter echoed. "Or where the curse waits, none." Ignoring her, Willard and Haverford worked the crowbar, the stone grinding as it gave way. Dust billowed, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Nasser's torch illuminated a new chamber, smaller than the antechamber, but no less grand. Its walls were bare, except for a single mural, a scarab with wings of flame, clutching a ruby-red heart. At the chamber's centre stood a pedestal, empty save for a faint indentation where an object the size of the heart of Ra might have rested. "The amulet was here," Nasser said, her voice tight. "Someone took it before Klein Sit's death." Poirot knelt by the pedestal, noting faint scratches, fresh like those in the antechamber. "We, but not long ago. The dust is disturbed. Our killer, they knew of this chamber." Haverford Sit's face darkened. "Kalain, he must have found it. Hadain, Sit's why he was killed. Or he was searching for it," Poirot countered, "and someone else reached it first." Willard Stead's voice trembled. "But how? The tomb was sealed until we arrived." Poirot Sit's eyes gleamed. "Sealed but not impenetrable. A hidden entrance perhaps, or a worker bribed to look the other way. Tell me, Monsieur Willard, you oversee the workers. Have any been unusually absent?" Willard flushed. I've noticed a few missing at night. Thought they were scared off by the curse." Nasser Stitt's gaze sharpened. "You didn't Stett report it, Tom. That Stett's reckless." "Reckless," Dubois interjected, her tone teasing. "Or convenient. Young men with ambitions might see opportunity in chaos." Willard rounded on her. "What Sit's that supposed to mean? I Sit not the one dropping cigarette cases near crime scenes." Dubois Stett smile. "Didn't Stett waver? Touché, monsieur. But we all have secrets. None." Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "Enough. This chamber confirms the amulet Stett's importance, but it also reveals the killer Sip's desperation. They risk exposure to retrieve it. We must search the camp, tents, belongings. The heart of Ray is close." As they emerged from the tomb, the sun now high, the camp stirred with renewed tension. Poirot organized a discreet search, pairing himself with Haverford to inspect the tents, while Nasser and Willard checked the artifact stores. Dubois, claiming fatigue, retired to her tent, but Poirot noted her lingering glance toward the cliffs. In Willard Sit's tent, Poirot found a crumpled map of the tomb, annotated with notes in a hurried scrawl, references to hidden passages and Rassit's light. "Curieux," he murmured. "Monsieur Willard, you are more curious than you admit." In Nasser's tent, a locked journal caught his eye, its pages dense with sketches of the tomb's inscriptions and a detailed drawing of the scarab symbol found at the murder scenes. Haverford's tent held a letter from Ashbourne, dated days before his death, hinting at a private deal to sell artifacts abroad. Dubois' tent yielded nothing but perfumes and silks, yet Poirot sensed her absence during the search was deliberate. As night fell, the discoveries weighed heavily. The hidden chamber had revealed the amulet's path, but deepened the web of motives: greed, betrayal, ambition. Poirot stood under the stars, his mind racing. The killer was cornered, and a cornered animal was most dangerous. He sensed the next strike was imminent, and he must be ready to intercept it. Chapter 12. Red Herrings and Revelations. The sun blazed mercilessly over the Valley of the Kings, its heat a relentless reminder of the stakes in Pharaoh Sekhemre's tomb. Hercule Poirot, standing at the edge of the camp, with his straw hat shielding his eyes, surveyed the restless scene, workers whispering in tight knots, their tools idle, the remaining expedition members moving with the wariness of prey, sensing a predator. The murders of Lord Ashbourne and Professor Elias Klein, coupled with the theft of the Heart of Rat amulet, had frayed nerves to breaking. Yet Poirot's little grey cells were alight, sifting through the clues uncovered in the hidden chamber, the annotated map in Willard's tent, Nasser's scarab sketch, Haverford's incriminating letter, and Dubois's elusive cigarette case. "The killer weaves a clever web," he murmured, "but they have left threads dangling, and Hercule Poirot will pull them." The camp's tension was palpable as Poirot gathered Sir Reginald Haverford, Dr. Amira Nassar, Tom Willard, and Madame Celeste Dubois in the dining tent for a midday meeting. The authorities from Luxor were due by evening, and Poirot intended to narrow the field of suspicion before their arrival. The tent was stifling, the air thick with dust and distrust, as the group sat around the table, their eyes avoiding one another. Poirot began, his voice calm but piercing. "Mes amis, the murders in this camp are not the work of a curse, but of a cunning mind. A heart of Ra, stolen from Professor Klein, is the heart of this mystery. Yet clues mislead us, red herrings, designed to obscure. Let us clear the fog. Sir Reginald, this letter from Ashbourne." He produced the crumpled paper from Haverford's tent. "It speaks of a private deals to sell artifacts. Explain." Haverford's face reddened, his hands gripping the table. "That's not what it seems, Poirot. Ashbourne proposed selling minor artifacts, pottery, beads to private collectors. I refused. I am an archaeologist, not a thief." "Yet you kept the letter," Poirot noted. "Why?" Haverford hesitated. "I meant to confront him, but then he was killed." Poirot turned to Nassar, holding up her journal with the scarab sketch. "Mademoiselle, this drawing matches the symbols at the murder scenes. Why did you create it?" Nasser's eyes flashed with defiance. "It's Sitzer's research. The scarab is central to Sekhemre's Sitzer's iconography. I was studying its variations, nothing more." "Research," Poirot echoed, "yet so precise a match. Were you perhaps studying the murders as well?" Her jaw tightened. "I step no killer, monsieur. I protect Egypt's heritage, not destroy it." Willard shifted uncomfortably, his youthful face pale. Poirot produced the annotated map from his tent. "Monsieur Willard, this map, your notes speak of Tari's hidden passages, Sitzend and Theja, Racid's light. You knew of the secret chamber before we found it." "None." Willard's hands trembled. "I was theorizing. Kleinsicht's inscriptions mentioned hidden spaces. I mapped possibilities. That Sicht's all possibilities," Poirot said. "Or plans. Your ambition is great, monsieur. Did it lead you to eliminate rivals?" Willard stood, his voice cracking. "That's absurd. I stoop no murderer. I just wanted to prove myself." Madame Dubois laughed softly, her scarf fluttering. "Such passion, young man. But, Monsieur Poirot, what of me? My cigarette case, surely it proves nothing." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It proves, madame, that you were near the tomb when you claimed to be elsewhere. A small lie, perhaps, but lies grow. Your sea investment talks with Ashbourne, were they about smuggling as he planned?" Her smile was serene. "Monsieur, you weave stories. I advised him on markets, nothing more. As for the case, I dropped it during a walk. Careless, none." "Careless," Poirot repeated, pacing slowly. "Or deliberate. Let us consider another red herring, the eerie moans, the vanishing footprints, the scarab symbols, all designed to invoke the curse, to halt the dig, or to divert attention from the true goal, the heart of Rai." Haverford frowned. "But the amulet sits gone." What sits the killer sits, aim now. Poirot sits, mustache twitched, to escape perhaps with their prize, or to silence those who know too much. The hidden chamber suggests a secret entrance to the tomb, a path the killer uses. We must find it. Nasser Stowe's eyes widened. A secret entrance? That would explain the scratches, the sand piles. Willard nodded eagerly. I can search the cliffs. There might be a tunnel. Dubois tilted her head. And risk another sick accident sits. You are brave, Monsieur Poirot. Bravery is not required, Poirot said. Only logic. But I warn you all. The killer watches us. Speak nothing of this outside the tent. As the meeting ended, Poirot lingered, observing their departures. Willard hurried to the artifact tent, Nasser to her notes, Haverford to the workers, Dubois to her tent, with a lingering glance. Poirot stepped into the sunlight, his mind racing. The red herrings, scarbers, moans were distractions, but the map, the letter, the sketch pointed to a conspiracy. He resolved to inspect the cliffs at dusk, suspecting the secret entrance was near. As the sun dipped, casting the valley in crimson, Poirot found a narrow crevice behind the tomb, partially hidden by boulders. Fresh scuff marks and a discarded matchstick suggested recent use. His heart quickened. The pattern was clarifying, but danger loomed. The killer, cornered by Poirot's probing, would not hesitate to strike again. Chapter 13. The Gathering Storm. The air in the Valley of the Kings was thick with foreboding, as dusk settled, painting the cliffs in hues of amber and shadow. The camp, now a crucible of fear and suspicion, buzzed with the nervous energy of those who sensed the endgame approaching. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the dining tent, his small frame commanding the space as if he were a general before battle. His polished shoes gleamed, despite the desert's dust, and his mustache, impeccably waxed, quivered with purpose. The murders of Lord Ashbourne and Professor Elias Klein, the stolen heart of Rad Amulet, the hidden chamber, and the secret entrance in the cliffs, all pointed to a killer among the expedition. Poirot had summoned Sir Reginald Haverford, Dr. Amira Nasser, Tom Willard, and Madame Celeste Dubois for a final confrontation before the Luxor authorities arrived. The storm gathers, he murmured to himself, and Hercule Poirot will bring the lightning of truth. The tent was lit by lanterns, their flickering light casting eerie patterns on the canvas walls, mirroring the tangled web of motives and lies. The group sat around the table, their faces a gallery of emotions. Haverford's weary resolve, Nasser's guarded defiance, Willard's anxious fidgeting, Dubois' enigmatic calm. The workers, too frightened to venture near the tomb, had retreated to their tents, leaving the camp eerily silent, save for the distant howl of a jackal. Poirot began, his voice steady, his green eyes piercing each in turn. Hermes. 2 men lie dead, their blood staining the sands of this ancient valley. Lord Ashbourne, killed by a dagger. Professor Klein, garroted. The heart of Radamelet, a treasure of legend, is stolen. Scarab symbols, eerie moans, vanishing footprints, all crafted to invoke a curse. But I, Hercule Poirot, see through this masquerade. The killer is here, among us, and tonight the truth will be unveiled. Haverford shifted uncomfortably. Poirot, you sit as certain it's that one of us. Couldn't that it be an outsider, a thief from Cairo? Poirot shook his head. None, Sir Reginald. The precision, the knowledge of the tomb, the use of its artifacts, these are the work of an intimate. Let us review. Lord Ashbourne, greedy for profit, planned to smuggle artifacts. Professor Klein, obsessed with the heart of Ray, knew of the hidden chamber. The amulet's theft suggests a motive of greed or fear of exposure, but there is more. He produced Willard's annotated map, Nassau's scarab sketch, Haverford's letter from Ashbourne, and Dubois' cigarette case, laying them on the table like evidence in a courtroom. Each of you has secrets. Monsieur Willard, your map shows knowledge of hidden passages, knowledge you hid. Mademoiselle Nassau, your sketch mirrors the murder symbols too closely. Sir Reginald, your letter reveals complicity in Ashbourne's schemes. Madame Dubois, your cigarette case places you near the tomb, despite your denials. Willard Stee's face flushed. I told you, the map was theoretical. I wasn't sneaking around. Nassau Steck's voice was sharp, and my sketch is academic. You sat, twisting innocent work into accusations. Haverford slammed a fist on the table. That letter proves nothing. I refused Ashbourne Sit's deal. Dubois' Ister's laughter was soft, dangerous, and my cigarette case, monsieur, a trifle. You build castles from sand. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Each clue is a thread, and together they weave a pattern. But one thread stands out. The secret entrance I found in the cliffs, marked by scuffs and a matchstick. Someone used it to move unseen, to steal the amulet, to kill. And I have observed your habits, your lies. He turned to Willard. Monsieur, you are ambitious, eager to outshine Haverford. Did you kill to secure the amulet, to make your name? Willard stood, trembling. No, I swear. I only wanted to learn, to contribute. Poirot faced Nassau. Mademoiselle, your passion for Egypt Sept's heritage is fierce. Did you kill to protect the tomb from looters like Ashbourne? Nassau Sitz's eyes blazed. Eyes to fight for my country Sitz's history, but not with murder. To Haverford. Sir Reginald, your dictators on financial ruin. Did you eliminate Ashbourne to hide your complicity and Klein to secure the amulet set's profit? Haverford Stiss' face paled. Good God, Poirot. I stem no killer. I wanted fame, not blood. Finally, Poirot turned to Dubois. Madame, your charm conceals a calculating mind. You spoke of smuggling with Ashbourne, and your cigarette case betrays your presence at the crime scenes. Did you kill for wealth? Dubois' smile was icy. You flatter me, monsieur, but I am a widow, not a murderer. A sudden gust rattled the tent, extinguishing a lantern. In the brief darkness, a faint clink echoed, a metallic sound like a coin dropping. When the light was restored, Poirot's eyes darted to the floor, where a small key lay near Dubois' chair. He retrieved it, holding it up. Curieux, a key, madam, from your scarf. What does it unlock? Dubois' Steele's composure faltered, her hand touching her scarf. It steals nothing. A trinket. Poirot Stitt's gaze hardened. Nothing does not fall in the presence of murder. This key, I suspect, unlocks more than a trinket box. The group tensed, accusations hanging unspoken. Poirot paced, his voice rising. The killer has overplayed their hand. The amulet is near, hidden in the camp or the tomb. Tonight I will search the secret passage again. But beware, the storm is here, and the guilty cannot hide. As the meeting dissolved, the group scattered, their faces etched with fear and doubt. Poirot stepped into the moonlight, clutching the key, his mind racing. The pattern was nearly complete, but the final piece, the killer's identity, hovered just out of reach. The night was alive with danger, and Poirot knew the next hours would bring the storm's full fury. Chapter 14. The Unveiling of the Truth. The moon hung high over the Valley of the Kings, its silver light casting an ethereal glow on the cliffs, as if the ancient gods themselves watched the drama unfolding below. Hercule Poirot had summoned the remnants of the expedition, Sir Reginald Haverford, Dr. Amira Nasser, Tom Willard, and Madame Celeste Dubois, to the entrance of Pharaoh Sekemre's tomb for a final reckoning. The air was thick with anticipation, the desert silent save for the occasional rustle of sand stirred by a restless wind. Poirot stood before the group, his small frame radiating authority, his moustache quivering with the certainty of revelation. The Luxor authorities were hours away, but Poirot could wait no longer. "The time has come," he declared, his voice resonant in the stillness, for Hercule Poirot to unveil the truth and unmask the murderer who hides behind the curse of Sekemre. The group stood in a semicircle, their faces illuminated by flickering lanterns, each betraying a mix of dread and defiance. Haverford clutched a torch, his eyes weary but resolute. Nessa stood rigid, her notebook clutched like a talisman. Willard shifted nervously, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Dubois, her silk scarf fluttering, maintained her enigmatic smile, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Behind them, the tomb's dark maw loomed, its hieroglyphs glinting like silent witnesses. Poirot began, his hands gesturing with precision. "Messieurs, 2 murders have stained this expedition. Lord Ashbourne, stabbed with a ceremonial dagger. Professor Klein, garroted, the heart of Whodunit stolen. Scarab symbols, eerie moans, vanishing footprints, all crafted to mimic a curse. But I, Hercule Poirot, see the human hand behind these acts. Let us reconstruct the truth." He paced before the tomb entrance, his eyes sweeping the group. Lord Ashbourne was killed for his greed. He planned to smuggle artifacts, as Madame Dubois confirmed in her overheard conversation. Professor Klein, with his knowledge of the hidden chamber and the heart of Ray, was a threat to the killer's plans. The amulet, a ruby of legend, is the key, but not for its value alone. It is a symbol of power, of control. Haverford Still's voice trembled. "Poirot, get to it. Who sits the killer? Poirot, get to it. Who sits the killer?" Poirot raised a finger. "Patience, Sir Reginald. First, the clues, the vanishing footprints swept away by a broom, a simple trick. The scarab symbols, drawn to frighten, not by a scholar, but by one who knew their effect. The moans, produced by a hidden whistle, perhaps in the secret passage I found in the cliffs. And this," he held up the small key from Dubois' scarf. "A key to a lockbox, found after our last meeting. It led me to a discovery." He paused, letting the tension build. "Last night I searched the secret passage. Hidden behind a boulder was a lockbox, containing not the heart of Ray, but documents, letters between Ashbourne and a buyer in Cairo, detailing a smuggling plan. And another item, a torn page from Klein's notebook, describing the amulet's true power, not magic, but a map to a lost treasury, hidden deeper in the cliffs." Nasser gasped. "A treasury? Sekemre's wealth?" "Oui," Poirot said. "Worth killing for. But who?" "Sir Reginald, your financial ruin made you desperate, but your loyalty to archaeology is genuine. Mademoiselle Nasser, your passion for Egypt's heritage is fierce, but murder violates your principles." Monsieur Willard, your ambition drove you to map hidden passages, but you lack the cunning for such crimes. He turned to Dubois, whose smile faltered. Madame, you are the enigma. Your cigarette case, found near the tomb. Your investment talks with Ashbourne. Your key to the lockbox. You played the charming widow, but you are a master of deception. You killed Ashbourne to silence his reckless smuggling, which threatened exposure. You killed Clune because he discovered the amulet's secret, the treasury map. You used the secret passage, drew the scarabs, staged the curse to halt the dig and secure the treasure for yourself. Dubois laughed, but it was brittle. Monsieur Poirot, what a tale! You have no proof. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Proof? The lockbox, Madame, bore your fingerprints, found on the letters, the matchstick in the passage, your brand from Paris, and the wire garrote, hidden in your tent under a false bottom in your perfume case. You underestimated Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. The group gasped, stepping back as Dubois' composure cracked. Her hand darted to her scarf, but Poirot was faster, signalling Willard, who grabbed her arm. "It's over, Madame," Poirot said. "The heart of Ran is safe, hidden by Klein before his death. I found it this morning, in the artifact tent, wrapped in his notes." Dubois' eyes blazed, then dulled. "Clever, monsieur. But the treasury? It would have been mine." Haverford shook his head. "Celeste, why?" "For freedom," she spat. "From poverty, from widowhood. You fools chase glory. I chase power." Poirot nodded gravely. "And now, you chase justice. The authorities will take you at dawn." As Dubois was restrained, the group exhaled, relief mingling with shock. The curse was broken, not by gods, but by logic. Poirot gazed at the tomb, its secrets laid bare. The final twist, the treasury map, promised new discoveries, but for now justice was served. Chapter 15. Echoes of the Nile. The dawn broke over the Valley of the Kings with a serene majesty, the sun's first rays gilding the cliffs and casting a warm glow on the expedition camp, now free from the shadow of murder. Hercule Poirot stood on a rise overlooking the Nile, its waters shimmering like liquid silver, reflecting the eternal cycle of life and death. His linen suit was immaculate, his mustache perfectly waxed, but his green eyes held a quiet melancholy as he contemplated the resolution of the case. The arrest of Madame Celeste Dubois, unmasked as the killer of Lord Ashbourne and Professor Elias Klein, had lifted the veil of fear from the camp, but Poirot knew that truth, like the desert, was never without its cost. "The little grey cells," he murmured, "they triumph, but the heart, it feels the weight of human folly." The camp was stirring as the Luxor authorities arrived, their motorcar kicking up clouds of dust along the track. Dubois, her wrists bound, was led from her tent, her once charming demeanour replaced by a cold defiance. Her silk scarf, now crumpled, trailed behind her like a fallen banner. Sir Reginald Haverford, Dr. Amira Nasser, and Tom Willard watched in silence, their faces a mix of relief and sorrow. The workers, emboldened by the breaking of the curse, had resumed their tasks, their chants echoing faintly from the tomb. Poirot gathered the team one last time near the tomb's entrance, the heart of Amulet, recovered from Klein's hidden notes, now secured in a locked case under Nasser's watchful eye. "Mes amis," he began, his voice resonant, "the mystery of Secumri's tomb is solved. Madame Dubois, driven by greed for the lost treasury, hinted at by the amulet, killed to protect her scheme. Lord Ashbourne, Her partner in smuggling became a liability with his reckless ambition. Professor Klein, with his discovery of the treasury map, threatened her plans. She used the myth of the curse, scarabs, moans, vanishing footprints to sow fear and halt the dig, hoping to escape with the amulet and its secrets. Haverford shook his head, his voice heavy. To think I trusted her. She funded half the dig, Poirot. I never suspected. Nasser Steck's eyes were fierce. She exploited our work, our heritage, but the amulet stays in Egypt where it belongs. Willard, his youthful ambition tempered by the ordeal, nodded. And the treasury? Klein Sid's notes. Do they really point to it? Poirot Sid's moustache twitched. Oui, Monsieur Willard. The map, hidden in Klein Sid's torn page, suggests a cache in the western cliffs, a secret Sikemre, guarded even in death. But it is for you, the scholars, to uncover it with care, not greed. Haverford managed a smile. We still do it properly, Poirot. For history, not profit. Thanks to you. Poirot bowed slightly. It is my method, Sir Reginald. Order and logic. The little grey cells see what the heart obscures. Madame Dubois wove a clever web, but she underestimated Hercule Poirot. As the authorities took Dubois away, her final glance at Poirot was one of grudging respect. The camp settled into a tentative peace, the workers' chants growing stronger, the tomb's secrets no longer cloaked in terror. Poirot walked to the Nile's edge, where the steamer Isis awaited to carry him back to Cairo. Nasser joined him, her expression softened. Monsieur Poirot, you've saved this expedition and Egypt's heritage. How can we thank you? Poirot smiled. By continuing your work, mademoiselle. Preserve the past, but beware the greed that festers in the present. And perhaps a cup of proper tisane in Cairo, non? She laughed. A rare sound. It sets a promise. As the steamer's whistle sounded, Poirot boarded, his mind already turning from the desert's dramas to the quiet of his next journey. The Nile flowed on, its echoes carrying the weight of centuries, and Poirot felt a fleeting peace. Justice was served, the truth unveiled, and the echoes of Sekemre's curse were silenced, not by gods but by the relentless logic of one small Belgian detective. Dear friends of mystery, the sands of Egypt have yielded their secrets to Hercule Poirot, but what enigmas lie hidden in your own lands, from the bustling streets of a city to the quiet corners of your hometown? Share your location and tell us of the puzzles you've encountered, perhaps a mystery worthy of Poirot's little grey cells. Subscribe to our channel to join the next adventure, where intrigue awaits and truth is but a clue away. Let us unravel the world's secrets together.